The proving grounds on Hectorus Prime's largest moon stretched out like a scar across the barren landscape, all polished metal and reinforced platforms designed to withstand the kind of firepower that could crack a planet's crust. Today, though, the weapons weren't aimed at targets or training drones. They were aimed at a human. Commander Vorlix of the Hoktar Empire stood at parade rest, his forearms crossed in what passed for satisfaction among his species. His crimson carapace gleamed under the moon's twin suns, each segment of his exoskeleton inscribed with battle honors from campaigns across 6 star systems. Behind him, arrayed in perfect formation, stood 200 of his finest warriors. The Crimson Talons, they called themselves. Elite didn't begin to cover it. These soldiers had put down rebellions, crushed pirate fleets, and made 3 neighboring empires think twice about their border disputes. And today, they were going to teach a human a lesson about humility. "I want to be absolutely clear," Vorlix said, his translator rendering his clicking mandibles into smooth galactic common, "that we bear no ill will toward your species. This demonstration is purely educational." Educational. Right. The way a professor educates an ant by stepping on it. The other council representatives, Plex Dominion, Mothkar Collective, even a few independent observers, had gathered in the viewing platforms above the arena. They chatted amongst themselves, placing bets, sharing refreshments. This wasn't a military exercise to them. It was entertainment. The newest spacefaring species, humanity, had requested permission to demonstrate their combat capabilities before the Galactic Coalition. How adorable. How quaint. How absolutely doomed to failure. Had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 20 cycles ago. They'd shown up in the galactic community with their soft skin, their fragile bones, their laughable single heart per body. They didn't have armored hides, didn't have redundant organs, didn't have the kind of evolutionary advantages that came from developing on a proper world. Their home world, Earth they called it, was barely a Class 6 environment. Pleasant, temperate, the kind of place you'd retire to, not the kind of place that forged warriors. "We appreciate your patience, Commander," said the human who stood in the center of the arena. And, oh, she was something to behold. Dahlia, just Dahlia. That's what her credentials said. No rank, no military designation, no house affiliation. Mid-30s by human standards, average height for her species, which made her comically short compared to the 3-meter-tall Hoktar surrounding her. She wore what looked like exercise clothing, of all things. Fitted pants, a sleeveless top, shoes that appeared designed for running rather than fighting. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple tail. No armor, no visible weapons, no enhancement ports or cybernetic interfaces. She looked like she'd wandered onto a battlefield by mistake on her way to the gymnasium. "Before we begin," Dahlia continued, stretching her arms above her head in a movement that made several Hoktar exchange amused clicks, "I have a small request." Vorlix's mandibles spread in what his species considered a smile. "Of course. Would you like protective equipment? Perhaps a training weapon? We can certainly provide—" "I'd like all of them." Silence rippled across the arena. "I'm sorry?" Vorlix said. "All of them." Dahlia gestured at the assembled battalion. "I know you assigned Battlemaster Kulix to go easy on me, and that's very kind. But I think it would be more illustrative if I demonstrated against your full battalion. All 200 soldiers. At once." The laughter started in the viewing platforms and cascaded down to the arena floor. Even Kulix, who'd been limbering up his primary combat arms, stopped to stare. His translator crackled with something that might have been a chuckle or might have been choking. Hard to tell with Hoktar physiology. You want, Vorlix said slowly, my entire battalion to engage you simultaneously. With live ammunition, if that's acceptable, Dahlia added cheerfully. I know training rounds are standard for demonstrations, but I think live fire would really drive the point home. Now the laughter had an edge to it. This wasn't a demonstration anymore. This was either the most spectacular case of human ignorance the galaxy had ever witnessed, or, well, no, it was definitely ignorance. What else could it be? Vorlix looked at his second-in-command, who shrugged 2 of his 4 shoulders. The commander looked at the viewing platforms where representatives were practically falling over themselves with mirth. He looked back at Dahlia, who met his gaze with calm, patient eyes and the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Pride warred with pragmatism in Vorlix's mind. On one hand, this was clearly a terrible idea. On the other hand, these humans needed to understand their place in the galactic hierarchy. Better they learn it here in a controlled environment than out in the real conflicts that raged at the edges of civilized space. Besides, he could always order the battalion to pull their shots, to incapacitate rather than— "We accept your terms," Vorlix said, "but I must insist on one condition. My soldiers will aim to disable, not to kill. We're not monsters." "Oh, how considerate," Dahlia said. And was that sarcasm? From a human who was about to face down 200 armed soldiers? "I'll try to show the same restraint." The viewing platforms erupted in fresh waves of laughter. Show restraint. Right. As if this human would have the opportunity to do anything other than surrender in the first 3 seconds. Kulix and the rest of the Crimson Talons took up positions in a wide semicircle around Dahlia. 30 meters distance, practically point-blank range for plasma rifles. Each soldier carried a Hoktar standard-issue pulse weapon capable of punching through starship bulkheads. Set to disable, sure, but even a glancing shot would put a human down for weeks. A direct hit would, well, best not to think about that. The mood in the arena had shifted from amused to almost pitying. Some of the younger soldiers looked uncomfortable. This felt less like a demonstration and more like an execution. "Ready positions," Vorlix commanded. 200 plasma rifles charged with a sound like distant thunder. Targeting lasers painted Dahlia's position from every angle, creating a web of red light that would have looked beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. Dahlia rolled her shoulders, tilted her head to one side until her neck cracked, a sound that made several Hoktar flinch, and settled into a stance that looked almost relaxed. Weight balanced on the balls of her feet, hands loose at her sides, breathing slow and steady. That smile hadn't left her face. "Targets acquired," Battlemaster Kulix reported. "Awaiting your command, sir." Vorlix raised one primary hand. He held it there for a moment, giving Dahlia one last chance to reconsider, to call this off, to admit that perhaps she'd overestimated human capabilities and underestimated galactic military prowess. She winked at him. He dropped his hand. "At will," Vorlix commanded, "engage target." And 200 rifles opened fire at once. What happened in the next 6 seconds would be analyzed, debated, and studied by military academies across 3 galaxies for the next 100 cycles. Footage from 24 angles would be slowed down, enhanced, broken into frame-by-frame sequences. Xenobiologists would write papers. Tactical experts would revise their manuals. The entire galactic understanding of human capability would shift on its axis. But in the moment, all anyone could do was watch and try to believe what they were seeing. The thing about plasma fire, and, oh, you really need to understand this, is that it doesn't travel at the speed of light. It's fast, sure, faster than most species can consciously track. But it's not instantaneous. There's a fraction of a second between the moment the trigger gets pulled and the moment the superheated bolt arrives at its destination. Most species can't do anything with that fraction of a second. S apparently can. Dahlia moved. Not dodged. Not dove for cover. Moved. Like she'd been waiting for this exact moment her entire life, and was honestly relieved it had finally arrived. From the viewing platforms, it looked like reality glitched. One moment, she was standing in the center of a kill zone. The next, she was 3 meters to the left, and the space where she'd been standing erupted in a cascade of plasma bolts that carved scorch marks into the reinforced platform. 213 shots fired in that first half-second. Tracking systems logged every single one. Dahlia's body was where exactly 0 of them landed. "Impossible," someone in the viewing platform whispered. Oh, just wait. She wasn't running in a straight line. That would have been suicide. She was flowing, her body shifting through angles that the Hoktar targeting computers couldn't predict because they made no tactical sense. A human body shouldn't be able to change direction that fast without shredding ligaments, shouldn't be able to drop into a slide that brought her under a crossfire pattern, then spring back up into a sprint without losing momentum, shouldn't be able to read the minute adjustments of 200 rifle barrels and calculate safe paths through the geometry of death they were creating. But here's the thing about shouldn't. It's just another word for hasn't yet. 1.8 seconds in, and Dahlia had closed half the distance to the first line of soldiers. The Crimson Talons, to their credit, were professionals. They adjusted their aim, compensated for her speed, started firing in predictive patterns rather than reactive ones. Didn't matter. She went low, rolling under a spread of fire that would have caught her center mass. Came up in a different trajectory than her roll suggested she would, because, apparently, human spines could twist in ways that violated several Hoktar assumptions about vertebrate mechanics. A bolt passed close enough to her shoulder that it singed the fabric of her shirt, the first and only hit that came anywhere near landing. 2.3 seconds, and she reached the first soldier. Kulix, because, of course, it was Kulix. Battlemaster of the Crimson Talons, veteran of 42 campaigns, trained since youth in the 17 traditional Hoktar combat forms. He had 4 arms, each one capable of crushing steel. He had a carapace that could shrug off small arms fire. He had reflexes that put him in the top percentile of his species. He had about half a second to register that the human was suddenly inside his guard, before his world turned into pain and confusion. Dahlia's palm strike hit the soft joint where his secondary right arm connected to his thorax. Not hard enough to break. She'd promised restraint, after all, but hard enough to send a neural shock through his entire right side. His rifle clattered to the ground. Her other hand was already moving, fingers finding a pressure point on his primary left arm that Hoktar anatomy texts swore didn't exist. Kulix's legs stopped working, just stopped, all 4 of them. He hit the ground in a crash of armored chitin and wounded pride. Elapsed time, 2.6 seconds. Soldiers remaining, 199. The formation tried to adjust, tried to create firing lanes that wouldn't hit their own people, tried to track a target that was now among them, using their own bodies as cover, moving through their ranks like water through a sieve. Have you ever seen a school of fish move as one, splitting around a predator and reforming on the other side? It's beautiful, really. Synchronized, instinctive. Now imagine the predator is what's moving with that kind of fluid precision, and the fish are 200-kilo armored soldiers trying desperately to shoot something they can't quite see. 3.1 seconds. Dahlia dropped low again, sweeping the legs out from under a soldier who'd made the mistake of turning to track her. He went down hard. Her elbow found the nerve cluster at the base of his neck on the way past. He stopped moving. 3.9 seconds. A rifle swung toward her at close range, close enough that dodging shouldn't have been possible. She caught the barrel, redirected it with a twist of her wrist that sent the bolt into the ceiling, and used the soldier's own momentum to flip him over her shoulder. He landed on two of his comrades. All three went down in a tangle of limbs and weapons. The viewing platforms had gone dead silent. 4.2 seconds. The formation was collapsing inward, soldiers trying to retreat to a safe distance while maintaining fire. But there was no safe distance anymore. Dahlia was in the middle of them, and getting out of her range meant getting into someone else's line of fire. She jumped, actually jumped, using a fallen soldier's back as a springboard, caught another soldier's rifle mid-swing, and used it as a lever to send him spinning into his squad mates. Bones didn't break, but joints definitely dislocated. The screaming started in earnest. 4.8 seconds. Half the battalion was trying to shoot. The other half was trying not to get shot by the first half. Dahlia was the only one who seemed to know where everyone was at any given moment, and she was using that knowledge with surgical precision. A Hoktar warrior swung at her with all four arms in a pattern that should have been impossible to counter without taking at least one hit. She slipped between the strikes like smoke, her hand finding the soldier's primary weapon arm and applying pressure to a joint in a way that made him drop his rifle and drop to his knees in quick succession. 5.3 seconds. The air was full of plasma fire now, but almost none of it was aimed at Dahlia anymore. It was aimed at where she'd been a fraction of a second ago, or where desperate soldiers thought she might be going, or, increasingly, at other soldiers who'd moved into the line of fire while trying to get a clear shot. Vorlix was screaming orders, trying to restore some kind of tactical coherence. Might as well have been ordering the tide to stop. His soldiers were trained for combat, sure, trained for war, trained for chaos, but not this kind of chaos. Not chaos that wore a pleasant smile and moved like physics was a polite suggestion rather than a law. 5.9 seconds. The last soldier standing, a young recruit who'd frozen in place sometime around the 3-second mark, watched Dahlia step over the groaning bodies of his entire unit and stand directly in front of him. She was breathing a little harder now. Not winded exactly. More like she'd just finished a light jog. She reached out, gently took his rifle from his unresisting hands, and set it on the ground. "You did good," she told him, "keeping your finger off the trigger when you weren't sure of your target. That's smart. You're going to be fine." He fainted. 6 seconds exactly. 200 elite Hoktar soldiers, the finest warriors in 3-star systems, the pride of their empire, the soldiers who'd made generals nervous and pirates run, were on the ground. None dead. All incapacitated. Dislocated joints, struck nerve clusters, weapons disabled or scattered across the arena floor. And Dahlia stood in the center of it all, rolling her shoulders like she was loosening up after a warm-up set. The silence from the viewing platforms wasn't shocked anymore. It had passed shock somewhere around the 4-second mark. Now it was something closer to existential crisis. Vorlix stared at the carnage, at his battalion, at the human who'd just dismantled 200 armed soldiers in less time than it took to boil water. "What?" he finally managed, his translator barely functioning through his disbelief. "What kind of enhancement is that? What technology are you using? What genetic modification program produced you?" Dahlia looked up at him. That smile was still there, but there was something else in her eyes now. Something that might have been pity. I'm just a human, she said simply. This is what we call basic training. And that's when the real horror set in. The medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, their equipment whirring and beeping as they tended to 200 groaning Hoktar warriors. Not one of them was critically injured. Not one of them had a broken bone. Dislocated joints? Yes. Bruised pride? Absolutely. But Dahlia had kept her word about restraint, which somehow made it worse. Vorlix descended from the command platform, his movements stiff with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. Probably both. He approached Dahlia, who was accepting a water bottle from another human, a tall, broad-shouldered man in actual military uniform who'd appeared from the observation area. "Commander Vorlix," the uniformed human said, extending his hand in that strange human greeting gesture. "I'm Colonel Booker Lennox, human liaison to the Galactic Coalition Military Council. I apologize for the dramatic nature of today's demonstration." Vorlix ignored the hand. "Explanation. Now." "Which part would you like explained first?" Booker asked, and there was something in his tone, not quite amusement, not quite warning, that made the Hoktar commander's mandibles click with irritation. "All of it," Vorlix snapped. "What augmentations does she have? What combat drugs? What technology are you hiding that violates 6 different coalition treaties on biological warfare?" Dahlia took a long drink of water, then spoke. Before Booker could answer, "No augmentations, no drugs, no technology beyond what you can see. Impossible." "You keep using that word," Dahlia said. "I'm standing here. Your battalion is on the ground. Maybe it's time to reconsider what's possible." From the viewing platforms, representatives were descending in clusters, their conversations urgent and heated. The Plex Dominion's military attaché, a crystalline being named Zilith, who served as their chief tactical analyst, was among the first to reach the arena floor. His faceted surface refracted the harsh lights into rainbow patterns as he moved. "Colonel Lennox," Zilith said, his voice resonating through his structure like struck crystal. "I have reviewed the footage 6 times already. The human subject demonstrated reaction times that exceed the theoretical maximum for organic neural pathways, speed that should have torn muscle tissue, impact resistance that defies known biological parameters. I require an explanation that does not insult my intelligence." "Fair enough," Booker said. He pulled up a holographic display from his wrist unit. "Let's start with the basics. Earth, our homeworld. You've classified it as a Class 6 environment, yes?" "Correct," Zilith confirmed. "Temperate. Standard gravity within acceptable parameters. Atmospheric composition suitable for most oxygen-breathing species. A pleasant retirement world." "Right, except you measured it wrong." Booker expanded the display. "Earth's gravity isn't standard. It's 1.3 times galactic standard. Has been for its entire geological history." Silence rippled through the gathering crowd of alien representatives. "Every human who's ever lived," Booker continued, "developed in an environment that would be considered high-gravity training conditions by coalition military standards. Our bones are denser because they have to be. Our muscles are stronger because anything less would be a liability. When we come to your space stations, your ships, your worlds, most of which operate at galactic standard, we're essentially operating in reduced gravity." Vorlix's carapace plates shifted in agitation. "That accounts for strength, perhaps. Not speed, not those reaction times." "Ah, but it does." Booker pulled up another display, this one showing a human nervous system in glowing detail. "Humanity evolved as pursuit predators. Do you know what that means?" "Predators that chase prey," a Mothkar observer offered. "Not just chase. Outlast. Booker's smile had an edge to it now. Most predators are sprinters, quick bursts of speed, then they need to rest. Most prey animals are the same. Fast escape, then hide. Humanity? We're neither. We're the thing that keeps coming. We can run for hours, days, if we have to. Our ancestors would literally chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. He zoomed in on the neural pathways. To do that, we needed brains that could track moving objects across long distances while we were also moving. We needed to predict trajectories, account for terrain, adjust our path in real time. We developed the ability to throw objects with accuracy, which requires calculating angle, velocity, and timing while our target is in motion. Our visual processing, our kinesthetic awareness, our reaction times, they're all optimized for dynamic, three-dimensional combat scenarios. Zilith's crystalline surface flickered with patterns that suggested deep thought. You're saying humans evolved as persistence hunters? With a side of ranged combat capability, Booker confirmed. And here's where it gets interesting. You asked about pain tolerance earlier, Commander Vorlix. Let me show you something. He pulled up what looked like medical records. The gathered aliens leaned in, then recoiled. These are documented cases from human history, Booker explained. Soldiers who continued fighting with fatal wounds for minutes, sometimes hours. A human named Hugh can continue functioning with blood loss that would send most species into immediate shock. We have redundant systems for pain management. Adrenaline, that's a human chemical response, can temporarily shut down pain receptors and boost strength by significant percentages. Temporary berserker state, Zilith murmured. Most species have that. Most species burn out after 30 seconds and need hours to recover, Booker countered. Humans can maintain elevated combat readiness for extended periods. And we don't just have fight-or-flight responses. We have fight and flight, simultaneously. We can run away while turning around to throw things at our pursuers. We can retreat while maintaining offensive capability. A Plex Dominion general pushed forward through the crowd. This still doesn't explain. She gestured at the arena floor, where medics were still treating groaning soldiers. Those were elite warriors, trained from hatching. She's a civilian. Is she? Booker's expression was carefully neutral now. Dahlia, what's your official occupation? Fitness instructor, Dahlia said, wiping sweat from her forehead. I run exercise classes on the civilian transport ship Orbital Dawn, mostly cardio and strength training for long-duration spaceflight. The Plex General's translator made a sound that suggested profound disbelief. Let me clarify something, Booker said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Every human you've met, every diplomat, every merchant, every civilian, has gone through what we call basic education, physical education, starting from childhood. We learn to run, to climb, to fight, to survive. It's not military training. It's just what humans do. Because Earth is the kind of world where not knowing how to handle yourself physically means you don't survive long enough to reproduce. He pulled up footage now, training videos from human schools. Children, young humans, running obstacle courses, learning hand-to-hand combat, swimming through rough water, climbing structures that would challenge adult members of most species. This is elementary education, Booker said quietly. Ages 6 through 12. Every human goes through this. Every single one. Vorlix's mandibles were trembling now. And your military? Our military, Booker said, and now his smile was absolutely predatory. Consists of the humans who looked at that baseline and said, not enough. The ones who specialize. the ones who train every day for years, the ones who've optimized their bodies for combat the way you might optimize a starship's engines. He pulled up new footage. Human soldiers moving through training exercises that made the earlier children's courses look gentle, carrying equipment loads that, according to the readout, exceeded what Hoktar-powered armor typically assisted with, moving through environments that cycled between extreme heat and extreme cold, engaging in combat scenarios that lasted for days without rest. Dahlia is, as she said, a fitness instructor, Booker continued. She's what we'd consider in decent shape for a civilian. She's not special forces. She's not even enlisted military. She just takes care of herself and knows the basics of human combatives. The viewing area had filled with representatives now. 3 different species military commands were present. All of them were staring at the displays with expressions that transcended language barriers, universal looks of dawning horror. "Your actual military?" Zilith started, then stopped, his crystalline structure flickering rapidly with patterns that suggested his species' equivalent of stress. "Has been very politely staying out of galactic conflicts," Booker finished. "Not because we're afraid, not because we lack capability, but because every tactical simulation, every war game scenario, every analysis our strategists have run comes to the same conclusion." He closed the displays and looked directly at Vorlix. "If humanity commits to galactic-scale warfare with full deployment, the conflicts will be over in months, maybe weeks, depending on logistics. And nobody, not you, not us, not anyone, wants to live in the aftermath of that." A Mothkar observer, her antennae quivering, spoke up. "You're threatening us." "No," Dahlia said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're warning you. There's a difference." She walked to the center of the arena, where Kulix was being helped to his feet by medics. The battlemaster flinched when she approached, and she stopped, giving him space. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for the humiliation. That wasn't the point." "Then what was?" Kulix managed through his translator. Dahlia looked up at the viewing platforms, at the assembled representatives, at the 3 rival empires who'd been escalating tensions near human space for the past 6 cycles. The Hoktar Empire, the Plex Dominion, and the Mothkar Collective have been playing war games at our borders, she said. Fleet movements, territory disputes, proxy conflicts. You've been treating human space like it's up for grabs, like we're too new, too soft, too primitive to matter. She turned in a slow circle, making eye contact with representatives from all 3 factions. "We've been patient," she continued. "We've been diplomatic. We've followed every coalition protocol, filed every proper complaint, attended every mediation session. We've been peaceful." Her voice hardened. "Don't mistake that for weakness." Vorlix's translator crackled. "So, this was... what? A demonstration of force?" "A reminder," Booker corrected, "that humanity chooses peace, actively chooses it, every single day. But choice implies options, Commander. And we want to make absolutely certain that everyone understands what the other options look like." Zilith's crystalline surface had gone dark, all his internal light dimmed. "You sent a civilian to humiliate our finest warriors as a political message." "We sent a civilian," Dahlia said, "to demonstrate what even our civilians are capable of. Take from that what you will." The gathering began to disperse, military attachés whispering urgently into communication devices, diplomats forming tight clusters of anxious conversation. The Mothkar Collective's observers departed without a word, their antennae flat against their heads in what their species considered a posture of deep contemplation, or fear. The Plex Dominion's delegation moved more slowly, their crystalline forms refracting the arena lights into fractured rainbows that seemed dimmer than before. But Zealith stayed. The young analyst stood at the edge of the arena, watching as the last of the Crimson Talons were helped away by medical personnel. His faceted surface pulsed with slow, thoughtful patterns, deep blues and purples that his species associated with intellectual processing. When the arena had mostly cleared, he approached Dahlia with careful, deliberate steps. "May I ask you something?" he said, his voice carrying that resonant quality that made Plex's speech sound like wind chimes in a storm. "A question that no one else seems willing to voice?" Dahlia was stretching now, working through a cool-down routine that looked almost meditative. "Go ahead. Were you truly a fitness instructor before today?" She looked up at him, and for the first time since the demonstration began, her smile reached her eyes. "You're asking if I lied. I'm asking if the truth was, perhaps, strategically incomplete." "Honest answer?" Dahlia straightened, considering him. "Yes, I run exercise classes on civilian ships. I help people maintain muscle mass and bone density during long-duration space travel. I teach basic self-defense because it's required for civilian transport certification. Everything I told you was true." "But?" Zilith's patterns shifted to curious greens. "But you're asking the wrong question." "Then what is the right question?" Dahlia glanced at Booker, who nodded slightly. She turned back to Zilith. "The right question is, why did humanity send a fitness instructor to a military demonstration?" Zilith's entire crystalline structure went still. The kind of stillness that indicated his full processing power was engaged. "Because," he said slowly, "if a fitness instructor can do this, then your actual military—" "Is something you don't want to think about too hard," Booker interrupted, walking over to join them. "But, since you're asking the right questions, Zilith, let me show you something. Off the record." The Plex analyst's patterns flickered with uncertainty. "Off the record?" "Meaning this doesn't go into any official reports." "Not yet. Not until your Dominion decides how it wants to handle the information." Booker pulled up his display again, but this time he keyed in a security code that made the hologram shimmer with encryption markers. "What I'm about to show you is classified by human military standards, but our command has authorized limited disclosure for analytical purposes." He brought up footage that made Zilith's light patterns stutter. Soldiers, but not like the training videos he'd shown earlier. These were combat recordings, actual deployments, peacekeeping operations on frontier worlds, hostage rescue missions, counter-piracy operations in the unmapped zones beyond Coalition space. "This is a standard human infantry unit," Booker narrated as the footage played. "Not special forces, not elite operators, standard. Watch how they move." The soldiers flowed through a hostile environment like Dahlia had flowed through the Battalion, reading terrain, covering angles, moving with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. But unlike Dahlia's demonstration, they were carrying equipment. Lots of equipment. Weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, communications gear, enough kit to outfit a small army. And they were running. "That's," Zilith's voice crackled with disbelief, "that's 80 kilograms of equipment. Each, at least." 92, actually, Booker corrected. "Standard infantry loadout for extended operations. They can maintain that pace for 12 hours before requiring rest." The footage shifted, a close-quarters combat scenario in what looked like a derelict station. The human soldiers moved through corridors with rifles raised, clearing rooms with mechanical precision. When contact came, hostile forces, some species Zilith didn't recognize, The humans didn't panic, didn't hesitate. They just executed. Clean shots, controlled fire, flanking maneuvers that appeared spontaneous but were clearly the result of hundreds of hours of training. One soldier took a hit, solid impact to the torso that should have put him down, and kept fighting, kept moving, applied pressure to the wound with one hand while maintaining weapon control with the other. "He's injured," Zilith said. "Yes." "He's still fighting." "Yes." "That wound would incapacitate most species." "Most species," Booker agreed, "aren't human." The footage continued. The injured soldier, still mobile, still combat effective, helped extract his team and 2 rescued hostages before finally accepting medical treatment. The timestamp showed he'd operated for another 20 minutes after taking the hit. "This is normal for you?" Zilith's patterns had gone completely white, his species equivalent of shock. "Define normal," Booker said. "It's not every soldier, every mission, but it's not exceptional either. That soldier received a commendation for his actions, but it was for the successful rescue, not for continuing to fight while wounded. That part was just expected." He closed that footage and opened another file. "Now let me show you what actually is exceptional. What our special forces look like." "I don't think I want to see that," Zilith said quietly. "Probably wise," Booker admitted, "but you need to understand the scale we're talking about. The difference between what Dahlia demonstrated today and what our actual military can deploy isn't additive, it's exponential." He pulled up a simple comparison chart instead of footage. Physical performance metrics, reaction times, endurance measurements, combat effectiveness ratings. "This is Dahlia," he indicated one column. "Above average for a human civilian. This, another column, is our standard infantry. This, a third column that made the others look small, is our special operations forces. The ones who specialize in the kind of work that needs doing when diplomacy fails and standard military operations aren't precise enough." Zilith studied the chart, his light patterns cycling through colors that had no human equivalent. "The gap between civilian and military is significant. 5 times more effective in most metrics," Booker confirmed. "And the gap between standard military and special operations is another order of magnitude. We have humans who can operate independently behind enemy lines for months, who can infiltrate facilities that are supposed to be impossible to breach, who can eliminate threats with such precision that nearby civilians don't even know anything happened until it's over." He paused, letting that sink in. "And we've never deployed them in galactic conflicts," he added. "Never had to. Because the truth is, most conflicts can be resolved through normal diplomatic channels if everyone's being reasonable. And when everyone sees what our civilians can do, reasonableness tends to increase." Zilith turned away from the display, his facets catching the light in ways that suggested internal turmoil. "You're saying that everything we thought we knew about human military capacity was wrong." "Not wrong," Dahlia offered. "Incomplete. You measured us by our diplomats, our merchants, our civilians. That's fair. It's how first contact works. But you made assumptions based on that limited data set." "We assumed you were weak," Zilith said bluntly. "You assumed we were peaceful," Dahlia corrected. "And we are. But peace isn't weakness. It's a choice." Booker pulled up one more display, and this one made even Dahlia raise her eyebrows. "Ship classifications. The human fleet roster. These are the vessels we've deployed for coalition patrol duties and merchant protection," Booker said, highlighting a section. "You've designated them as destroyers and cruisers in your tactical assessments." "Correct," Zilith confirmed. "Wrong," Booker said flatly. "These are escort frigates and light patrol craft in our naval classification system. Our actual destroyers have never left the home system. Neither have our cruisers, our carriers, or our capital ships." The display showed a comparison. What the Galactic Coalition called a human destroyer was classified in human naval doctrine as an escort frigate, designed to protect larger vessels and patrol shipping lanes. The actual human destroyers were 3 times the mass, with weapon systems that, according to the technical specifications, could crack a moon. "Why haven't you deployed your real warships?" Zilith asked, and there was something like accusation in his tone. "If you have this capability, why hide it?" "Because we didn't need to," Booker said simply. "And because the moment we deploy capital ships, everyone in the galaxy starts treating us like a threat instead of a partner. We're trying to build relationships here, not intimidate neighbors." "Until today," Zilith pointed out. "Until 3 separate empires started treating our borders like their personal playground," Dahlia said, her voice harder now. "Until military exercises started looking less like exercises and more like preparation for invasion. Until we had to make a choice between maintaining pleasant fiction or establishing uncomfortable truth." She walked to where Zilith stood, looking up at the taller, crystalline being. "We don't want war. We really, truly don't. But we need you to understand that our reluctance isn't fear. It's not inability. It's choice. And if you push hard enough to eliminate that choice, what comes next won't be something anyone's prepared for." Zilith's patterns had stabilized now, settling into a deep, contemplative purple. "You're asking us to take you on faith, to believe that humanity is this powerful, this capable, and will choose restraint over conquest." "No," Booker said. "We're asking you to look at the evidence. We've been in the galactic community for 20 cycles. How many wars have we started? How many territories have we claimed through force? How many times have we used our apparent capabilities to dominate neighbors?" "None," Zilith admitted. "None," Booker repeated. "We've defended ourselves when attacked. We've assisted in humanitarian crises. We've upheld coalition law even when it disadvantaged us. We've done everything we said we'd do when we joined your community. And now we're asking, politely, for reciprocal respect, for our borders and our space." From across the arena, Vorlix had been watching this conversation. He approached now, his movements still stiff from wounded pride, but his posture more measured than before. "A question," the Hoktar commander said. "Your capital ships, your real military. If you deployed them tomorrow, how long would it take to reach Hoktar space?" Booker and Dahlia exchanged glances. "I can't answer that," Booker said carefully. "Can't or won't?" "Both. Because the answer would either sound like a threat or reveal capabilities that are better left classified." Vorlix's mandibles clicked in what might have been grim amusement. "So, fast enough to matter." "Fast enough that you should never need to find out," Dahlia said. The Hoktar commander looked at his battalion, most of them back on their feet now, nursing their injuries and their egos in equal measure. "My soldiers are the best the Empire has produced. They've conquered worlds, and a human civilian dismantled them in 6 seconds. "Yes," Dahlia said simply. "Because that's what basic human training produces." "Yes. And your actual military is to you what my elite warriors are to ordinary Hoktar civilians." Dahlia hesitated, then nodded. "That's one way to think about it." Vorlix was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Booker. "I will recommend to my command that the planned exercises near human space be postponed indefinitely. That would be wise, Booker said, and I will personally ensure that any battle doctrine involving potential human conflict is completely revised. Also wise. Vorlix looked at Dahlia one more time, and something in his posture had shifted. Not quite respect, that would take time, but recognition, understanding. Your demonstration today was humiliating, he said. I know, Dahlia replied. I'm sorry for that. Don't be. Humiliation is preferable to the alternative. He gestured at his recovering soldiers. They'll heal. Their pride will recover. Better they learn this lesson here than somewhere it would cost lives. He turned and walked away, calling for his officers to assemble for immediate tactical review. Zilith watched him go, his patterns shifting through thoughtful blues and greens. The Dominion will need to reconsider many things, he said quietly. Our expansion plans, our military projections, our entire strategic assessment of this sector. Take your time, Booker said. Think it through carefully. Run your simulations. Do your analysis. We're not going anywhere. That, Zilith said, is both reassuring and terrifying. Dahlia smiled, that same small, knowing smile she'd worn before the demonstration. Welcome to dealing with humanity. We're full of contradictions like that. As Zilith departed, his crystalline form catching the light in contemplative patterns, Booker turned to Dahlia. Think it worked? He asked. Oh, it worked, Dahlia said, rolling her shoulders one more time. Check the fleet tracking in about 2 hours. I bet all 3 empires will start pulling their ships back from our borders. And if they don't? Dahlia's smile widened just slightly. Then I guess they'll need another demonstration. Maybe next time we send an actual soldier. Booker laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. You're terrible. I'm effective, she corrected. There's a difference. They walked toward the exit together, leaving the arena floor where 200 elite warriors had learned a lesson they'd never forget. Above them, in the viewing platforms, representatives from a dozen species were having very urgent conversations about strategic reassessment and diplomatic priorities. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human warships that had never fired a shot in anger continued their patient patrols, their true capabilities unknown, their presence a quiet promise that peace was always an option, as long as everyone remembered it was a choice, not a necessity. 3 cycles later, the military exercises near human space had vanished. The Hoktar Empire, Plex Dominion, and Mothkar Collective suddenly discovered urgent need for their fleets elsewhere. Border disputes quieted, diplomatic channels opened wide, and Dahlia went back to teaching cardio classes. How does it feel, one of her students asked during a workout session, being the person who changed galactic politics? She laughed, adjusting the resistance on the training equipment. I just did my job, demonstrated what humans are capable of. The rest was their choice. But across 3 empires, military academies had added new courses to their curriculum. New tactical doctrines emerged, all starting with the same premise: avoid conflict with humanity. Not because humans were invincible, but because they were unpredictable. Because their civilians were warriors. Because their warriors were something else entirely. Because a species that evolved chasing prey across continents, that learned to throw stones at moving targets, that built civilizations on a high-gravity death world. That species wouldn't fight like anyone expected. And nobody wanted to find out what humanity looked like when peaceful choice became unavoidable necessity. The galaxy had been warned. Some lessons, it turned out, only needed teaching once.